Today we're doing my final top 45 running back rankings for fantasy football. If you want to win your fantasy football league in 2024, hit that like and subscribe button as I'm answering every start sit question this season, starting it off in the S tier. And there's a bunch of people we could add to this tier, but the top three guys are going to be CMC, Bijan, and Breece Hall. And listen, if you have an issue with me putting Bijan ahead of Breece Hall, I do not debate you. I think when I see people ranking Breece Hall or Bijan Robinson ahead of CMC, I'm like, I don't know how you can do it. I understand there's ultimate level upside. They're younger. Breece Hall has Aaron Rodgers this year, Kirk Cousins for Bijan Robinson. Even if CMC loses 10% of production, and I've been talking about this in pretty much all my videos where I mentioned CMC's name, he's still the RB1 overall, and he should be the 101 overall in any type of format unless it's a super flex format. Christian McCaffrey, 101, lock it in. Now, the debate then becomes Bijan Robinson versus Breece Hall. Listen, your perfect flavor. I like the upside of Bijan Robinson. I think in his max amount of ceiling is going to be a CMC, LaDainian Tomlinson type output. I don't think Breece Hall has that same level upside, but I think Breece Hall has a safer floor. So if you prefer a safer floor compared to a guy like Bijan Robinson, sure, draft Breece Hall. But I like all three of these guys in the first round S tier. I can't add any other running backs to this S tier because I think that is the biggest gap in the running back landscape right now. Let me know how you would rank these first three running backs. My next two guys I want to talk about are in the A tier. It's going to be Jonathan Taylor and Jahmyr Gibbs. If you asked me before, like 2 weeks ago, I had Jahmyr Gibbs higher than Jonathan Taylor in my projections. When I went back in, did my projections based on like Jahmyr Gibbs, a little bit of the hamstring issues, Jonathan Taylor eclipsed Jahmyr Gibbs when I was looking at a per touch fantasy football basis. So Jonathan Taylor, I do think taking him in the back end of the first, especially if in a 12-man league, it doesn't feel great because I absolutely loved when I was able to get Jonathan Taylor in the second round. But that's really where you're going to be having to take these two guys at the turn. But especially if you go hero RB, I still feel very confident with Jonathan Taylor or with Jahmyr Gibbs as my RB1 in fantasy football. The next two guys in this tier is going to be Travis Etienne and Saquon Barkley. And I really like Travis Etienne. I think Travis Etienne, when we saw him last year on that snap share, dude had an above 75% snap share the whole season. Now, a lot of that was because Tank Bigsby wasn't able to overtake and command any type of snap share, really struggled, fumbled a lot. Now we're going into year two with Tank Bigsby, and of course, Doug Peterson has made all of the comments, hey, I want it to be a running back by committee. I just cannot get behind the upside that Travis Etienne possesses, especially without Calvin Ridley. I know they added Brian Thomas. I think Travis Etienne is going to be, like we said, another focal point year. Can he remain durable? Because I know that was the question. He kind of post week 8, things really start to fall off, the overall touchdown upside, the overall points per game upside. But I do feel really confident with my projection with Travis Etienne sliding in here as my RB6. At my RB7 is going to be Saquon Barkley. This is the best offense Saquon Barkley has played in his entire NFL career. And if he can get the volume, I know he's a little bit older, he's had his injury woes, but Saquon Barkley is still that same elite level prospect that we were predicting. And even if he's maybe not the monster athlete that he was when he came in pre-ACL injury, he's still an elite level running back athlete. I think you could argue probably a top 2 or 3 running back talent. Slide him into an offense with the Philadelphia Eagles with a great offensive line with Jalen Hurts, AJ Brown, the whole crew. Got to feel really good about Saquon Barkley. I think you could make the argument that Saquon Barkley should go ahead of Travis Etienne in my rankings, but this is kind of where I'm stopping it and putting it. And my last 3 guys in the tier is going to be Kyren Williams, Devon Achane, and Derrick Henry. Kyren Williams, it's been all over Twitter. If you haven't been on Twitter, oh, Sean McVay said that Kyren Williams is going to return punts. If he's returning punts, Caleb, how is he going to have elite level fantasy football value like last season? I understand they brought in Blake Corum. I love Blake Corum as a late round stash. Kyren Williams is still that dude that we saw last year, and Sean McVay absolutely loves to use bell cows. We can look at the last few years, whether it was the Darrell Henderson year, whether it was the Cam Akers year, whether it was Todd Gurley. Like, he loves to use a bell cow that can absolutely be efficient, and Kyren Williams showed the touchdown upside. He showed the receiving upside. The Rams offensive line really hasn't gotten that much better. It got a little solidified, but I still think there's going to be plenty of opportunity for Kyren Williams in this offense. The question is where that elite level upside lies, and I think that's why I feel more confident with a guy like a Travis Etienne or a Saquon Barkley over Kyren Williams at this point. But I do think when you're in the middle of the second round, being able to get a hero RB type like Kyren Williams, or even if you go double hero RB, where you grab maybe one of those guys in the first and you're able to get Kyren Williams in second, it does feel like an elite level start. Devon Achane, we've talked top 5 points per game basis last year. The biggest thing was him just staying healthy, and his size is a little bit concerning, but he does play in an ultimate level offense with Mike McDaniel. So you got to feel really good about Devon heading into year 2. He's put on some weight. He's put on some muscle. They did draft Jalen Wright, so that could be potentially a concern for you, but I'm not scared because he had a 45% snap share and still put up top 5 points per game numbers. Imagine if that snap share even goes up 50 or 52%, which isn't going to be crazy going into year 2. Devon Devon Achane has league-breaking upside. And so, honestly, if I got a guy like Breece and I was able to come back around in the second round and get a guy like Devon, or maybe feel safer about Breece compared to Bijan and then take that upside shot with Devon in a double hero RB build, absolutely love it. Last guy in this tier is going to be Derrick Henry. And Derrick Henry, I think we know who Derrick Henry is. Like, when he was with the Titans these last 2 years, he's kind of a back-end RB1 on a points per game basis, but is really dependent on a ton of touchdown upside. Those yards per carry numbers have gone down, but imagine him now in this amazing offense with Todd Monken, with Lamar Jackson. They're going to run the heck out of the ball. Read option with Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson. Who the heck am I choosing to stop? And I think having a rushing quarterback in the backfield is going to make a night and day difference for Derrick Henry. Only reason my man's is lower than a guy like Devon or Kyron is really that receiving level upside, and that could all be wiped out with that touchdown upside that he does possess. We could be talking about Derrick Henry getting 20 total touchdowns, kind of having like a David Montgomery type touchdown season, also having an elite level touch season in between the 20s. So Derrick Henry, I do like him. I'm just a little bit worried and playing age factor here into the A tier. We move on here to the B tier, and the B tier is a big tier for me. We got Isaiah Pacheco, Josh Jacobs, Alvin Kamara, James Cook, Joe Mixon, and Rachaad White. And this is kind of where these guys all kind of go in the early third to the middle part of the fourth, back end of the fourth, depending on how your league mates like wide receivers and if it's in half PPR or full PPR format. Isaiah Pacheco, I know they just signed the Kansas City Chiefs, just signed Samaje Perine. A lot of people are like, oh, like what's going to happen? Like Samaje Perine couldn't make it on the Broncos, ladies and gentlemen, so I'm not worried about Samaje Perine for Isaiah Pacheco's overall value. I do think a lot of people would put Isaiah Pacheco in the A tier, right, with Kyron and Devon and Derrick Henry. I personally couldn't do it just because I think Isaiah Pacheco, he's a safe floor. Like, where's that ultimate level ceiling? He's playing in a Patrick Mahomes level offense. So the upside is that he gets like one rushing touchdown a game plus, anywhere between 50 to 80 yards. If he can get more receptions, if he can be that full 3-down package, which I know Andy Reid has talked about this year, I could be eating my words here with Isaiah Pacheco and eating this ranking, but I do like Isaiah Pacheco in the B tier. And Josh Jacobs is the next guy in the tier, and AJ Dillon's out for season. So Josh Jacobs should be getting the volume. I know he's getting up there in age. He got the huge contract. The Green Bay Packers did draft Marshawn Lloyd in the third round, so not like they don't have anybody else behind Josh Jacobs. So Marshawn Lloyd probably, as the season progresses, will get more volume. But this is the best case scenario for Josh Jacobs, where really it's just him and another back in a committee. And when I say committee, we're talking this might be like Travis Etienne and Tank Bigsby like from last year, where Josh Jacobs is getting 68 to 70% of the touches in a Jordan Love-led offense with a ton of weapons around. Like Matt LaFleur is a really good play caller. So Josh Jacobs, we have to love it. We have to respect it. Honestly, Josh Jacobs, that news did bump him up my rankings. Have him here in the B tier. The next guy is going to be Alvin Kamara. Alvin Kamara last year, top 5 on a points per game basis when he came back from that suspension. Also, he's getting up there in age. We are looking at age 29 Alvin Kamara. And so a lot of people are also worried about the injuries. Same with Derrick Henry. The difference is Alvin Kamara wins out of the backfield. So especially if you're playing in a PPR or half PPR format, Alvin Kamara is way more valuable than if you were talking your typical standard league. Because Alvin Kamara, even though last year you're like, okay, Caleb, he's getting up there in age. He got the receptions. Like, how is that supposed to be better this year? Last year, he only had a 50% snap share. So if Alvin Kamara can even do that, if he can just repeat what he did last year, have a 50% snap share, even if things go down a little bit, this is amazing value that you're getting for Alvin Kamara in the B tier. I can't push him up because it feels dumb to be like, yeah, Alvin Kamara right there behind Travis Etienne in Saquon Barkley. I think the ultimate level ceiling, we have seen it, but he would need to get more like the 70% snap share. So I could be eating crow on Alvin Kamara too. Alvin Kamara, I definitely love the value. I'm definitely targeting him in the 4th round in a lot of drafts, especially if I want to kind of do, I wouldn't say Alvin Kamara is like a hero RB type build, but I think having Alvin Kamara as your RB2, or even if you wait and get him as your RB1, I don't think it's the worst thing in the world. We go to the next guy in this, and it's going to be James Cook. And I've told you, James Cook and Dalton Kincaid, like those are the only two things we can rely on in this Buffalo Bills offense. I think the main worry for me with James Cook is where's that touchdown upside when we look on the last 2 years. There is an exciting part of the fact that, James Cook potentially, if he could get 6 total touchdowns like DeAndre Swift did last year with the Philadelphia Eagles, that James Cook could easily return on this value and be a middling RB1. I think for me, I think I have him priced appropriate due to value, but I don't think he's really going to be going up or down. I think he's going to be a steady running back for you. I just don't know where that ultimate level upside is going to lie for a guy like James Cook, but I do like that he does have a ton of breakaway runs, that he does catch passes out of the backfield. We do like that for James Cook. And then the last two guys in this tier, it's going to be Joe Mixon and Rachaad White. And Joe Mixon, we've seen Joe Mixon on the volume dependency alone be a very, very, very good running back, a top 12 running back the last 2 years. And now he's going into a situation with the Houston Texans, which is very similar to a situation with the Cincinnati Bengals. So you're going to say to me, Caleb, I don't know why we're concerned about Joe Mixon. A lot of people have him higher ranked in their running back rankings. My other thing is he's also getting to that age. We saw last year in this class with guys like Alvin Kamara and Joe Mixon, we saw guys flame out like a Dalvin Cook. I think the thing that we need to remember about running backs is it is a young man's game in the running back backfields. And so when these guys start approaching 30, I know I have Derrick Henry ranked high. I know I have Joe Mixon ranked high. I know I have Alvin Kamara ranked high. The wheels are going to fall off at some point. And so we are ranking them here. And I think that's the precaution is what if they come out and they look like Dalvin Cook last year who had no explosion. So that's kind of where I'm looking at in this B tier. The next guy in this B tier is going to be Rachaad White. And Rachaad White, if we knew he had Dave Canales, you could have the discussion that Rachaad White should be priced ahead of James Cook and Joe Mixon. But since he doesn't have Dave Canales, he still has Baker Mayfield, so that's going to be a pro for Rachaad White. Can he get back to 70 receptions? I have him projected for 55 receptions, which even that alone, getting like 15 less receptions is enough for us to be a little bit concerned about Joe Mixon's overall value. So let me know what you think of this B tier. Let me know how you're viewing these tiers so far. In this next tier, I got a bunch of guys. I got Javonte Williams, I got DeAndre Swift, I got Kenneth Walker, David Montgomery, James Conner, Aaron Jones, Raheem Mostert. Starting off with Javonte Williams, I'll be honest, when I did my projections, I came out a lot more favorable of Javonte Williams than I initially thought. Listen, I know they have Audric Esme, I know there's Jaleel McLaughlin, I know Bo Nix is a rookie level starter, but I think all that benefits Javonte Williams in 2024 fantasy football, especially with it being year 2 removed from an ACL. We absolutely love drafting these running backs that had a lot of potential, a lot of athleticism. It's always hard drafting them year 1 off an ACL, as much as we're going to talk about a guy like 2 guys later off ACLs, but Javonte Williams is year 2 removed from an ACL. We really didn't get to see a ton of explosion last year, so I know we're a little bit worried about Audric Esme taking some of the touchdown upside. We're worried about Jaleel McLaughlin taking a little bit of that receiving upside, but I do think this is the proper shot to take on a guy like Javonte Williams. It's probably higher than a lot of people want to take a shot on Javonte Williams, but I do think the potential is there in a really bad offense. I think he's going to be getting the volume, and that's what I'm looking for when I'm taking a shot on some of these later round guys. DeAndre Swift is the next guy. He got the contract from the Chicago Bears, and when you get a contract like he got, they're going to be using him. And when you add in Caleb Williams, rookie level quarterback, and we've seen amazing things from Caleb Williams. He kind of looks like a mini Patrick Mahomes out there, and potentially he could put Chicago on his back and prove everybody wrong. But I still think having a running back like DeAndre Swift to rely on in that running game with an improved offensive line really makes me have hope for DeAndre Swift, who last year, when you were drafting him in the round 6 or round 7, ended up kind of being a league winner through the first 6 weeks of the season before, of course, things kind of turned sideways for him later down the line, where he was still just putting up average mid RB2 numbers, but no longer had those overall RB1 numbers. Dude's a complimentary 3-down bell cow where he can take the early down work. He has the receiving upside. So I really think DeAndre Swift is kind of a sleeper this year, even though last year, if he kind of did what he did the whole season, we would be taking DeAndre Swift in that Josh Jacobs, Isaiah Pacheco category. The next guy in the C tier is going to be Kenneth Walker, and Kenneth Walker is splitting touches with Zach Charbonnet, and we don't need to be worried about that because, as we know, it's a new offense with Ryan Grubb. It's a whole new GM, a whole new staff. So really, they're not attached to Zach Charbonnet. They're not attached to Kenneth Walker, and I honestly think Kenneth Walker is the more talented running back. I do think you need to be taking some shots on Zach Charbonnet late just to kind of play it safe. Not that you need a handcuff, but just I think Zach Charbonnet does have some pretty good upside being that second round selection that he had last year. They're going to use him just based on that draft capital. But I do think Kenneth Walker, we haven't seen the receiving work. We haven't seen him in really an efficient level offense to get a lot of touches because he's been kind of banged up the last 2 years throughout the season. So I'm pretty excited to see Kenneth Walker. I think if we're talking purely talent-wise, Kenneth Walker should be in the A tier just based on talent alone, but we do have him here in the C tier in our rankings. Next guy's going to be David Montgomery, who I think David Montgomery is probably going to be somewhere around like a 40% snap share this year, which is kind of where he ended off being towards the end of the season. If we remember, David Montgomery through the first 3 to 4 weeks of the season before Jahmyr Gibbs really got his footing under him was an absolute elite level fantasy football running back, and he was kind of touchdown dependent later on, but I think he's going to still be touchdown dependent, but he's playing in an offense with the Detroit Lions where, if they're in the 5-yard line, they're putting David Montgomery in there because that dude can absolutely get it. We've seen it with Jamal Williams 2 seasons ago. We saw it last year with David Montgomery. I think in this year 2 of David Montgomery, he is going to be an absolute bell cow. We move on to the next guy in this tier, and it's going to be James Conner, who I even will admit, James Conner is not playing behind a great offensive line for the Arizona Cardinals. There's the potential of a guy like Trey Benson, who got drafted in the 3rd round, right behind him to overtake him at some point this season, but James Conner has been good old reliable. James Conner, when he's in there, you know what you're getting. You're getting a high high-end RB2, you get a low-end RB1 on some weeks. The other thing with James Conner is he's also getting up there in age when we're talking about some of these older level running backs. And so you just have to understand, you might get caught holding the bag if you do draft James Conner, especially with Trey Benson nipping at the heels. The next guy is going to be Aaron Jones. And Aaron Jones goes from the Green Bay Packers to the Minnesota Vikings. So big, big divisional switch. Aaron Jones also hasn't been able to maintain his health, but when he's out there, he's absolutely elite. So he's also getting up there in age, 29. This will be his 30-year-old season. So you got to keep in mind with some of these older level running backs, as much as Aaron Jones has been a staple of our fantasy football drafts for the last few years, sometimes we just get caught holding the bag. And I'm not saying that that's going to happen this year by any stretch of the imagination. I'm just saying that when I have Aaron Jones lower than maybe I would like, because I personally think Aaron Jones is a super talented running back in between the 20s with his receiving work, these are some of the conversations that you have to have in your rankings when you're looking at the overall volume that they're going to get. Next guy in the C tier is a Raheem Mostert. And Raheem Mostert, this might be criminal. Raheem Mostert, a lot of people are going to look at the age. They're going to talk about that. Like, Caleb, you just talked age on Aaron Jones, James Conner. Are you going to talk about age with Raheem Mostert? I am, but I'm also going to say this about Raheem Mostert. Since he had a very weird start to his NFL career, where he really didn't start taking touches on his NFL body until he was in the middle 27, late 28. Now he's 32. He honestly is almost like a 5-year NFL running back when you actually take a look at his overall touches in the NFL. So I do think he is fresh enough, and quote unquote, the mileage on his body, which that sounds super weird to say, is in a good enough position for him to continue to maintain value. I mean, last year, top 5 running back on a points per game basis, him and Devon were absolutely electric. He was a late round gem for you. I still think you're going to be able to get him fairly late for the value that he's going to provide. And I think you could easily talk yourself into being like, last year during the season, would you rather have started Raheem Mostert or DeAndre Swift? Of course, all of us are going to say Raheem Mostert. So you are getting a good value. I just think this year with Devon taking another step up, with them bringing in Jalen Wright, who is an electric back of his own, I just think Raheem Mostert, we're going to have to down our expectations for him. And this is why I have him here in the back end of the C tier. In the D tier, this is when things start to get juicy. And I already hear all of y'all commenting on this video saying, Caleb, you're a freaking idiot. And I understand there's a lot to dive in this tier. First guy leading off the D tier is going to be Ramondre Stevenson. Listen, Drake May ain't the starting quarterback, so it's going to be Jacoby Brissett. And Ramondre Stevenson has kind of been just a middling RB2 for the last 2 years. That has just been due to volume and the fact that he hasn't been able to get a ton of production. This is a volume play for me with Ramondre Stevenson, because honestly, if you're asking me to start the tier, Ramondre, Jalen Warren, and Najee Harris are also close for me in my rankings. Ramondre Stevenson just gets the upgrade purely because he doesn't have to compete with a guy like a Jalen Warren and Najee Harris competing with Antonio Gibson out of the backfield. So give me some Ramondre Stevenson starting off the D tier. Then we move on to the next 2 guys. And I think all last year, I ranked Jalen Warren, Najee Harris super close to each other. I like Jalen Warren's overall upside a lot more than Najee Harris. Listen, I know Jalen Warren is battling a little bit of an injury. So if you prefer to put a guy like Najee Harris above Jalen Warren, that's completely understandable. We also got to look out for Cordell Patterson. I mean, I swear to everything that's good. Arthur Smith loves to just mess with us. So I really can't put these guys higher. I probably should have, but I'm just not a huge Najee guy. But I also understand if you liked and thought that the last 2 years with Kenny Pickett really made Najee Harris and those slight injuries that he had a little bit inefficient. We move on to the next guy in this tier, and it's going to be Jonathan Brooks. And Jonathan Brooks, hear me out. I know he is going to be put on the pup for the first few weeks of the season. But when you're looking at fantasy football, you look at 2 things. We look at ultimate level upside, and we look at what are they going to be doing for us down the stretch. Because us drafting our fantasy football teams for week 1 is great. But if we can get a guy like Jonathan Brooks, who if Jonathan Brooks was fully healthy, hadn't torn his ACL, we would be putting Jonathan Brooks in probably the beginning of the C tier, if not at the end of the B tier, just due to the fact that he's got Dave Canales, and we saw what Dave Canales was able to do with a running back like Rachaad White, and we think Jonathan Brooks is just as talented as that, with a quarterback in Bryce Young who doesn't have an electric arm and likes to check the ball down. All things that really point to an elite level workload for a guy like Jonathan Brooks. Okay, cool. We're going to have to see him get ramped up post week 4. It's probably week 5, week 6 is probably not startable. So he's probably not startable until like week 7 at the earliest. I want my team. I want elite level running backs to get me into the playoffs. And I think Jonathan Brooks has that potential. So especially if you go hero RB and you want to take a shot on a guy like Jonathan Brooks later, highly recommend. If you go double hero RB and you want to get Jonathan Brooks as your RB3 for later, I think Jonathan Brooks ultimate level upside this year. Of course, rookie running backs, it's always risky when you draft them, but I do like some Jonathan Brooks. Next 3 guys in the tier is going to be Tony Pollard, who Tony Pollard clearly has separated from Tajay Spears. They gave him the money in free agency. They brought him in with this whole new coaching staff and coaching regime. I think we're going to see like 2 years ago, Tony Pollard, even though last year he really did have great volume for the Dallas Cowboys, he just didn't get the touchdowns. And honestly, it was very frustrating, but you're not having to draft him as early this year. And I think the correction that we've had in the fantasy football community with Tony Pollard makes him appropriate level value here in the D tier. And the last 2 guys, one's going to be Zamir White. And there's a bunch of you you that watch this channel that love some Zamir White, and you're going to be telling me, Caleb, Zamir White, like, and Javonte Williams are like the same guy. Zamir White isn't competing with anybody for touches in that backfield. I hear you. All good things. I just think the Raiders offense is going to be pretty terrible this year for the running backs, and I don't know where the ultimate level touchdown upside is going to go for a guy like Zamir White. So I have him here. And then Jerome Ford, we got Nick Chubb, who's going to be going on the pup. Jerome Ford proved that in the absence of Nick Chubb, that Jerome Ford can be electric. They cut Deontay Foreman. So really it's like the Jerome Ford show in the Cleveland Browns backfield. Absolutely love this D tier. Let me know what I did wrong. Let me know what you agree with. Appreciate you guys for tuning into this video. When we start off the E tier, I'll be honest, Devin Singletary, Austin Eckler, Zach Moss, Zeke, Chase Brown, Trey Benson, Nick Chubb, we start to get into a little bit of a dirty category. Devin Singletary, we know he's going to get the volume, but he's playing for the Giants. Where's that overall touchdown upside? I also think Devin Singletary is just a jag. So the fact that they lost out on Saquon Barkley and then they brought in Devin Singletary, I do not have the utmost confidence in Devin Singletary at all. I just think this is a pure volume play. Austin Eckler, he leaves the Chargers offense where last year he did not return on his first round draft capital. You're not having to take him anywhere near the first round, but he's playing now in a committee with both Brian Robinson and Chris Rodriguez, with Jaden Daniels, a quarterback who's Timecodes. We absolutely love it. Loves to use his legs. How many check down passes is a guy like Austin Eckler going to get in an offense with a rookie level quarterback? But we do have seen the upside before. So if things absolutely go Austin Eckler's way, I do think this is an appropriate level of value to have him. Now, I did split up Zach Moss and Chase Brown in these rankings. I didn't put them close together like Jalen Warren and Najee Harris. I think Zach Moss is the clear one. I think Zach Moss is going to be getting the touchdown upside, which for me in the Cincinnati Bengals offense is going to be enough to give me the nod to Zach Moss. Now, I think Chase Brown is more electric, and I could definitely be eating my words here. This could be a thing where the Lightning and Chase Brown is better than the Thunder with Zach Moss, but I did put Ezekiel Elliott in between because I think Zeke, the touchdown upside, even though we didn't see it for Tony Pollard last year, I do think Zeke is going to be getting the volume, whether it's good or bad, whether he averages 3.8 yards per carry this year. I like Rico Dowdle as like a later round dart throw, but I do think Zeke, we have seen the pedigree with Ezekiel Elliott in this offense, so give me some Zeke there. Then we're rounding out this E tier with Trey Benson, who is an electric level rookie. We already talked about how Trey Benson could potentially be pushing James Conner for that RB1 overall role post week 8. We've also seen James Conner the last 2 years has only played in 13 total games. So there is volume to be had. There is games to be missed for James Conner. And Trey Benson, if you need a late round dart throw, I say late round dart throw, but he really is a super talented running back out of the Florida State. I think if he would have maybe landed in a better situation like Jonathan Brooks, we might be pumping up Trey Benson even into the back end in the early part of the D tier, like with Ramondre Stevenson. I do like Trey Benson here. I think you do get pretty good value. And the last guy in this E tier is going to be Nick Chubb. Listen, Nick Chubb has come back from ACLs before, ladies and gentlemen. He has performed at an elite league winning level. Now, I'm not saying he's getting up there in age. He tore literally every ligament in that knee. Him and Deshaun Watson, how is that going to look with Kevin Stefanski? We do like Jerome Ford. Jerome Ford has proven that they're both going to be in a committee once Nick Chubb comes back fully healthy. And we've seen these running backs before. And a guy like Nick Chubb, who honestly wasn't the most athletic running back to begin with, which maybe you're going to say, hey, that's a blessing because he can just be the super efficient, best running back, the best eyes that we've seen out of the running back position over the last few years. Just makes me a little bit nervous about that overall upside we have with Nick Chubb, especially in a full PPR format. So like I said, have him here in the back end of the E tier. I could be regretting this. Nick Chubb could definitely one of these guys that, like I said, we're ranking all these guys. And just because I have these rankings doesn't mean that I'm going to be 100% right. So I want you guys and your opinions down below. And rounding out my tiers, I just made a giant freaking F tier. And I'll just say this. This F tier is full of guys with ultimate level upside, but all have their quirks. First guy is going to be Gus Edwards. And honestly, you could probably make the adjustment that I probably should put Gus Edwards here in the E tier when we talk about pure volume, when we talk about him playing in the Jim Harbaugh offense. I hear you. Gus Edwards should be higher. So we'll put him in the E tier. It doesn't change his overall ranking for me. Gus Edwards is that type of dude that if he has the touchdown upside, he's played in the Greg Roman offense before. We'll have to see. If he can get 10 plus touchdowns, I think it's absolutely efficient there for Gus Edwards. And like I said, this rest of the tier, we got a bunch of handcuffs. We got a bunch of guys with upside. Tajay Spears, to me, if he was going to be the primary bell cow for the Titans, of course, he'd be ranked a little bit higher. But since he's not, we have to have him. Next guy is going to be Brian Robinson, who Brian Robinson was the starter last year with Antonio Gibson, but we're assuming that Austin Eckler is going to be the starter in 2024 fantasy football. So we can't put Brian Robinson, as much as we love what he's overcome in his life, we can't really put him higher. Corum, I have him here because I think Blake Corum, out of all the handcuff running backs, Blake Corum, if he lands shines in that Sean McVay starter role is absolutely going to be a league winner. And listen, there's been people in the comments saying I'm crazy on Blake Corum. No way that Sean McVay uses him in his first year as rookie. I don't know where those type of comments come from. I don't know where that type of thinking happens, because rookie level running backs get used all the time. It's actually the easiest position to play in the NFL. Give me Blake Corum right here in the F tier. Alexander Madison's the next guy here who we're assuming Zamir White's the one. You got Alexander Madison. A lot of people like Dylan Lobb as well. So Alexander Madison is pretty much just a handcuff. We have seen him being able to do volume, but there's nothing super efficient for him when he does get that volume. Next guy's going to be Tyler Algier, Jalen Wright, two elite level handcuffs with elite level offenses. I think Tyler Algier behind Bijan Robinson. We've even seen Tyler Algier last year have a ton of fantasy football value, even with Bijan Robinson. So if anything were to happen to Bijan Robinson, Tyler Algier instantly gets boosted into the top 12 running backs. So that's what I like to take shots on. A guy like a Tyler Algier, Jalen Wright, who Jalen Wright has looked explosive in the preseason. He does have Raheem Mostert and Devon ahead of him, but if things turn his tide, things could go really well for Jalen Wright. Same with Rico Dowdle. I know Rico Dowdle, for me, is the clear RB2 behind Zeke. I know there's been talks from Mike McCarthy that Rico Dowdle is going to get plenty of opportunity. That is still to be seen in this tier. We got Bucky Irving and Khalil Herbert, two handcuffs. Khalil Herbert, two DeAndre Swift, Bucky Irving, two Rachaad White. A lot of people are actually excited about Bucky Irving's receiving upside, so you could be pretty pumped about that. Continuing in the F tier, we got then Marshawn Lloyd, who is sliding in as the RB2 with no A.J. Dillon, with A.J. Dillon out for the year. Like I said, Marshawn Lloyd was drafted in the 3rd round, so if anything happens to Josh Jacobs, this is a very good offense for Marshawn Lloyd. Next guy is going to be Antonio Gibson. I'm still, like I said, with the New England weapons, I don't love any of them. Antonio Gibson last year was more of a scat back for the Commanders. He's going to be a scat back type for the Patriots, and we've seen how the Patriots like to rotate in and out of their running backs. They just paid Ramondre Stevenson, so he's going to be getting most of the work. Antonio Gibson, I don't know. I would say I'm not super excited about him. He's probably waiver wire bait depending on your league size. Next guy, two guys are going to be two rookies, Braylon Allen, Audric Estime. Audric Estime, to me, you like it in the Denver Broncos offense if you're just going to be getting a ton of the touches, but that is still to be seen. I got, like I said, Jaleel McLaughlin also back, so I kind of put both of these Denver Broncos backups together because Jaleel McLaughlin had his moments to shine. Last year was a waiver wire gem. Did have like 2 good weeks. He was a cheaper Devon, but then things kind of fizzled out for him, and that just overall offense as a whole. Braylon Allen looked really good. I liked Braylon Allen as a prospect coming out of the University of Wisconsin. The New York Jets landing spot behind Breece Hall. He's probably not going to get a whole ton of volume unless something were to happen, of course, to Breece Hall, but I do think Braylon Allen has the pedigree that if I draft Breece Hall and I want to grab a handcuff super late, Braylon Allen is super cheap, and he will be the guy if something were to happen. Tyron Tracy had himself quite the preseason. He got injured. A lot of people are in on Tyron Tracy. I picked him up in a lot of dynasty leagues. If you're super late and you want to take a flyer, you want to take a stash, I would get a guy like Tyron Tracy on your team. And the last two guys are going to be the backups to Gus Edwards, Kamani Vidal, and J.K. Dobbins. Listen, J.K. Dobbins, essentially his contract is purely incentives. They gave him like $40,000, which essentially covered his move to Los Angeles to live there. That was like his living expenses. So it's hard for me. And Kamani Vidal, of course, got late round draft capital, like super late. So both these guys do not have a ton of commitment from the team, which to me screams that I don't know which one to draft, because I think Kamani Vidal probably is a little bit more athletic in this point of the career, but J.K. Dobbins is also worked his way back. I've heard really great things from where he's kind of at camp. You take your poison. You take your poison between these two running backs, which one you would draft. And of course, I've left some guys still here on the board. Honestly, all these guys I'm not super excited about, but if you're playing a deeper league, of course, ask me questions down below if you have questions on who you should be picking up. So let me know what you think of these running back rankings. Let me know what you would change, what you would make different. Appreciate you guys. This was a longer video. Appreciate you guys for tuning in. Hit that like and subscribe button if you haven't already. Here's 2 more videos to tune in, and I'll catch you on the next one. Peace.